Hello and welcome to 10 Walks Explain Everything. I am Nicholas Walton and this is the fourth walk that I'll be doing to help explain the Netherlands, where it comes from, where it's going and how it works. And this is the first of the videos that I'll be doing. I'm on the island of Texel, a very special place, the largest of the Wadden Islands, so the ones that kind of skirt the top end of the Netherlands. Specifically, I'm just outside the little town of Den Bosch, which is the biggest one in the island. Very pretty, tidy little place, full of tiny little houses, all absolutely beautifully looked after. There's a real sense of pride. This is one of the holiday hotspots of the Netherlands, so there's loads of people, even in September, riding around on bicycles. Big groups have come across on the ferry with me. Everyone seems very excited. There's something special about being on an island. So why have I come to Texel as one of the ways to explain the Netherlands by walking around it? Well, the first thing is that I don't really need a reason to come to the Wadden Islands. They're one of my favourite parts of the Netherlands. Here you get forest like this that I'm walking through now, absolutely beautiful. Villages, farmland, and then it goes into sand dunes, and then you've got these enormous stretches of coastline going off into the distance. Big, sandy beaches with sometimes nobody on them if you go to a far corner of one of the islands, even in summer when the rest of the place is crawling with tourists. So that's the first thing. Now, the second reason why Texel is so important when you're trying to explain the Netherlands is that this was really about this small country on the northwestern tip of the Eurasian landmass, give or take Scandinavia, turning itself out to the world. Now, it had traded for a long time. Amsterdam, Middelburg, further south, Dutch-speaking towns such as Antwerp. There was a lot of trade going on. But what really happened in the 17th century was that they turned themselves out towards the rest of the world, not just the Baltic, not just the trade with the Mediterranean, and that was critical. The waters that I came across between Den Helder, which is at the northern tip of North Holland. It's a town there, and you take the ferry. It's a very short ferry, pops over here in no time at all to Texel. Those waters were the ones where all of the big VOC, the Dutch East Indies fleets, used to gather before making that extraordinarily perilous, deadly voyage across the sea. They would head down past Spain and Portugal. They would head slightly towards Brazil and then pull back across the Atlantic Ocean, taking advantages of the currents, to be able to then scoot around the southern edge of the Cape of Africa, across the Indian Ocean, and there they would end up at the southeastern corner of the Eurasian landmass. And the southeastern corner of the Eurasian landmass was where the great archipelago, what they call the Indies, would begin. And it started off with great islands like Sumatra and Borneo and Java, and it would continue past the Spice Islands, and this is what this was about at the time, until you were hitting the coast of New Guinea. Now, when the Netherlands did that, when the Dutch did that, that's really when the Golden Age began, because this was the source of so much. It was the source of prestige. It was the source of enormous amounts of money. And the Golden Age would not have been the Golden Age without the riches that those fleets were able to bring home. You see, back in the 16th century, spices were the route to extraordinary riches. The Western Europe knew about spices for a long time, but they had to come all the way across Asia, through many hands, from what's now the Indies or the eastern edges of China and Southeast Asia, and then they had to make this enormous journey changing hands, every time becoming more expensive, until they'd come back through the Ottoman Empire, and then they'd come through the hands of the Genoese and the Venetians, and finally make their way to Europe. And by this time, peppercorns, cloves, whatever, they were just phenomenally expensive. So whoever was able to get hold of spices by finding a different route, short-circuiting it, was going to have an enormous advantage. Now, the first ones that managed to get all the way to where all the spices were grown were the Portuguese. In 1498, they managed to round the bottom of Africa, around the Cape, and ahead of them lay the Indian Ocean. India, China, Southeast Asia, and then the archipelago that stretched off to the Spice Islands themselves. And that means that they were able to, in effect, monopolise the trade, bring back enormous riches to Portugal. But bit by bit, the other seafaring nations of Europe, driven by the amount of money that you could make on this, they followed. And just before the 16th century turned into the 17th century, this was when the Dutch managed to go as well. Now, their first voyage was not a success. It was incompetently led, it was murderous. Goodness knows how many people died, both the Dutch people on the ships and the people that they encountered. I mean, there was just blood and destruction wherever they went, ending in mutinies and whatever. They came back barely able to cover the costs of the voyage that they'd made, and all the lives they'd lost. But they made it. Second voyage, a lot more professional. They learned the lessons, and the Dutch basically put together a second voyage and struck out, and this time they came back, and it was obvious that they were onto something. But what happened just after that was they decided that the way to do it was not to compete amongst themselves, but it was to pool their resources and to form a company that was able to draw upon expertise, leadership, men, capital, and this became known as the VOC, the Dutch East India Company. And the VOC was really the thing that, it was the vehicle for driving the expansion of the Dutch Empire into the Far East and into the Indies. And it wasn't just the East Indies. There was a West Indies company eventually. So when you had figures like Jan Pieterszoon Cohen, who was really sort of forging the Eastern Empire, you also had people heading across to the Caribbean, even the north coast of Brazil, and getting involved in sugar plantations and things like that became also enormous cash cows. So all of the fleets that were gathering off the coast of Texel back in the 17th century, that really is the foundation of the Dutch as a global power, as an imperial power as we know it. It all started there. It all started just off the coast here. Of course, Middelburg, places like that also came into it. But this place, for me, really symbolises the Dutch turning out into the world and really, really making the most of it. You know, whether or not it was good for other people, let's talk about that.